as if I need to add even more books to my TBR, this one has me wondering if I should try out a little bit more historical fiction. Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video, we're going to be talking about Dreaming the Eagle by Manda. This is actually a library copy, but this is a really nice looking hardcover, so I wanted to still show because I'm probably going to end up trying to track copies of these down at this point because I did do a lot of this actually on audio because I'd already had the audiobook and then grabbed this so I could multi-format, but both formats were really, really enjoyable here. And this is one that I'd heard of this a little bit. I don't tend to read a lot of historical fiction, but this one was one that I'd heard about a bit, and I actually think some people are planning to read it, but specifically this was a patron pick from Heidi, and I've even joked, I feel like the books that I've done in polls for my patrons, I've had not a great track record with, the books that I'm choosing for them to vote on. The ones that have been recommended by my patrons and been patron picks have gone so much better, and this was certainly no exception. I really enjoyed this book quite a lot. Now, I do want to know, because this is technically historical fiction, however, I think you could really easily consider this historical fantasy, because this has, if anything, more fantastical elements than many a Guy Gavriel Kay does as well, and even though it's taking place in a real time period and based on some real characters, you know, we are still looking at the dreaming and some of these other things and then showing it in a nature where it seems very much to be real and not like it's just that sort of thing. So historical fiction, yeah, technically, but you know, this has enough to, you could easily consider it fantasy elements, like I said, so that's kind of neither here nor there. But this is the first book in the Boudica trilogy, which is following the story and kind of the background on Boudica, a well-known warrior queen that went against the Romans, and then also her brother Bon. We follow quite a bit as well with their different POVs. And we're starting when they're pretty young. One of the things I think interesting here is the characters do start pretty young, but they do feel very adult. And I think that's something that can be always interesting, because I found myself many times saying, like, why are these adult characters acting like they're children? But also, you don't want your child characters to seem too adult. And so one thing that's very understated, but I think is really well done here, is it's so easy to forget the ages of the characters because of the way that they're acting. But then there'll be comments, or you know, you'll see something where they'll do something suddenly that is childlike, and you're like, oh my gosh, yeah, this is a child. They're just in a culture and in a situation where they're having to really act in an adult way, and they're having to do things that are way past, you know, where they really should be at this point. And so I think that was handled pretty well. Now, overall, the biggest thing that stands out to me is this is just the storytelling. The storytelling here is just really good. The writing style, everything about it. This is very immersive. I felt pulled in very quickly, and I really was just enjoying consuming this story. Like I said, the audio was really good. Although the guy who does like the prologue, I wish would have done more because it was my favorite. But the audio was good, and also just reading this physically. And this is the kind of book that I feel like normally physical is what I prefer, but I liked both formats quite a lot. But I felt like even though this is a decently long book, it's 500 some pages. It's not super short or anything. I felt like I got through this very quickly. This was the last book I started before the end of the year, and it only took me a few days really to get through it, just because I was really, really consumed and enjoying it and had a really great time. I think the characters as well are strongly done in just the way they're kind of built up. They're complex, there's more going on, but it's the world and the kind of the culture that I feel like we get the most interesting things from. And I think some of that's because it is derived from actual history, but we're really showing it in such a rich way, and you really feel like you're being shown the culture, shown the events, and not really told what's going on. There's not times where you just feel like, oh, I'm reading a history book or anything like that at all. This very much feels, and another reason why it feels a little more historical fantasy, because this very much feels like that kind of story that's just being told to you and that you're experiencing. And so I think that worked really, really well. Now, the one thing I will say that was a little bit of a negative for me is a lot of the plot beats felt a little bit too familiar. Now, how can you say that about a book that's historical fiction? Well, despite the fact that this is based on real characters, most of this first book, at least, is completely the invention of the author, because there's really not much known about the childhood of the titular Boudica, you know, the younger life there. It's a lot of the records from that particular person come from way later, so there's not a lot known. So there's an author note too where they do say, hey, most of this is my invention, you know, here's the stuff that's actually based on history and some of the references and that kind of thing. And so I feel like that's still a fair critique, because I kept feeling like, I feel like some of this feels really familiar. And so I was curious how much of it was based, because this is not a historical time period or story specifically that I'm super familiar with, the subject material, so I was interested. So some of it felt a little bit familiar. Just, you do have your, you know, Braca, who, you know, is to become Boudica, going through, and, you know, she's younger and she's learning to be the warrior, and, you know, wanted to potentially go down a different path, because we do have this big thing with people being dreamers or being warriors, and she really wanted to be a dreamer, not a warrior. And then her brother Bon, who really wanted to be a warrior and not a dreamer, and following him. And a lot of the stuff with Bon specifically was just pretty bleak, and there wasn't like a lot of relief or anything with that particular character. It was just a lot of darker storylines, especially with that character starting out quite young. I wasn't fully expecting that, but kind of the plot line there as well, which I won't go into a ton of detail just because I don't want to spoil anything too much. But just the kind of plot line that he ends up following is a darker plot line, but also something that's not the most like original groundbreaking type of thing. So that's the only thing that kept this from being like a true like amazing 5-star for me. Although I will say all of that for me, take it with a grain of salt, because the storytelling was so good, I really didn't care. And none of my critiques actually really popped into my head until I was done reading, and I was just kind of thinking about the book and digesting it more, because while I was reading, I didn't really care. Like none of the things that I do think are you know, small flaws or issues here or there, none of that really came up until afterwards for me, because this was such an immersive read, and Manda Scott just very beautifully wrote this story. And again, storytelling, that's the thing that stood out the most. Her storytelling is phenomenal here. She does such a great job just really making you feel like you're in there experiencing the story. And so for me, that really just made it a worthwhile read in general, and I had such a great time with this book. Like I said, I was voraciously reading it. I went through so quickly, and I'm definitely going to be continuing this series. I'm not specifically sure when I'll get to them, but I'm definitely going to be continuing, because I really enjoyed this, and I just cannot wait to read more. That's why I'm wondering, like, should I read more historical fiction? I feel like Guy Gabriel Kay is close enough with historical fantasy. Really been enjoying his stuff, but that's the other reason. But after I read this, I might have to definitely check out more of what Manda Scott has done, because this is just really good, and I can tell that Manda Scott is an author who very much knows their craft and is just doing a really great job here. So really, those are my thoughts on Dreaming the Eagle, book 1 in Boudica. And I'm excited to see more. Let me know your thoughts on this. I know, like I said, others have definitely read this, and I think some people are planning to read it, so there's probably more people there. I know this is not my normal thing for my specific audience, but hopefully it's something enough of you are familiar with or interested in here with it. But I definitely wanted to talk about it, because like I said, I had a really fantastic time reading this one, and I really enjoyed it. So that's it for this one, though. Make sure to give the video a like if you enjoyed it. Check the links in the description, as always, for the Patreon if you want to support what I do, as well as the Wizardly Enclave Discord if you want to chat books, whether this book, other books, really anything at all. It's a lot of fun, and we'd love to have you. And of course, if you enjoy my content, make sure to subscribe.